The Clemson Tigers are on a recruiting roll.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal, your source for daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Clemson is absolutely rolling in recruiting. It's been a heater, if you will, that not many teams ever have, because not only are they getting really good players, not only are they getting them from all over the United States, these are players that were coveted by the nation's elite. How did Dabo and his staff get everybody to commit so quickly? We're going to talk a little bit about that, but first I want to go over the players themselves, and then a little bit later we're also going to talk about the impact of some of these guys not going to other schools, Notre Dame and Ohio State and different schools. Plus, the Buckeyes did get a commitment. Washington also gets a player that's really good from IMG. So let's break down the players that have committed to the Clemson Tigers. This was over the last few days. I knew they'd get a few kids because they had a junior day and all that, and that's great. But I didn't think it would be this impactful. Among the players that have committed, and I'm just going to go in order to make it easy, this group started off with Adam Guthrie. He's an offensive tackle, 6'7", 285, out of Washington Courthouse High School, or Ohio, and plays at Miami Trace High School. One of those kids that kind of goes under the radar based on what Clemson has done in terms of adding really elite offensive staff over the last year or two. I don't think there's any doubt that their evaluation is better. I don't care what any recruiting ranking says, myself included. I'll trust what Clemson does with their offense because they understand fit. And again, this is a kid that's from Ohio. They've gotten a few kids from Ohio in the last 5-6 years, so hats off to them in general, but Penn State and Ohio State were after him and both had OBs set. For him to commit to Clemson, that puts it in perspective. Really good players don't normally commit early if the Buckeyes aren't the choice, especially to a team down south, though. So that's the first thing to note here. Adam Guthrie, 6'7", 285 pounds. Clemson needs better offensive tackle play consistently. Looks like they got a good start there, and we're going to come back to O-line with them here in just a moment because that was just the beginning for the Tigers. Next up, maybe the best player of this group, depends on how you want to rank him, but I love him because I've seen him play live. He's from one of the best programs in the state of Florida, the Bowl School in Jacksonville, longtime tradition-rich program up there in Jacksonville. He can fly. Burroughs is a guy that even at the Under Armour All-American game as an underclassman, just watching him in practice, he could run by guys that were going to SEC in Big Ten programs. He's a track kid, great personality, by the way. Naeem's a really good dude. I think that he's the kind of player that could come in and play early. Clemson has shown that their freshmen at receiver, like last year, they obviously had one. If they come in ready, and Naeem's a mature kid, they can come in and make an impact. Burroughs may be the best freshman to end up in this class because his personality fits Clemson very, very well. He's a special player in terms of his athleticism, and he's a vertical threat. Clemson has proved for years that Dabo and his staff, whoever is his coordinator, they want to throw the ball down the field. Burroughs will fit that very, very well. He's 170, 180 pounds in that range, but he's a track kid, so his weight will fluctuate a little bit. I'm curious to see if maybe he does some track at Clemson, but I'm curious to see what he looks like a year or two from now after Naeem has been in the Clemson strength and conditioning program. That's a young man that he could be 190 pounds. That's really all he needs to get to. He's not the biggest guy in the world in terms of his frame, and he could be a 3-and-out guy and head to the NFL. He's really, really good. Speaking of speed, he committed on the 8th. Same day, another track kid, Connor Salmon, the last I remember, he ran a 10 400 meters Notre Dame and several other schools were really after him. Everybody was after Burroughs. A lot of people thought he was going to Florida, myself included. Salmon commits to Clemson. I know that Notre Dame was probably not real happy about that. He's from the Bullis School in Potomac, Maryland. Again, you cannot teach speed. Clemson's going to be a bear to deal with the vertical threats. Burroughs and Salmon will be two kids that run sub 10-5 in the same starting lineup. Good luck to DBs going up against Clemson moving forward. Connor Salmon, 6'1", so he's a little bit bigger. But the most important thing here, like if you go watch Connor Salmon's film, he not only can beat you over the top, which obviously with 10-4 speed you can, he's pretty twitchy too. He'll make one guy miss and then the straight line speed will take over. Now we're into the area that I find most fascinating because this is where Clemson's been, in my opinion, a little bit below where they needed to be national title contenders again. Offensive line. You could make the argument that this next young man, a kid that committed the day after on March 9th, he's the best interior offensive lineman in the country, at least one that's probably going to play center. Grant Wise. He's from the greater Pensacola area. He plays at Pace High School. He lives in Milton, Florida, just outside of Pensacola. He's an animal. He's got ties to Miami, of all places, but he picks Clemson. He could have went to a bunch of different schools. For him, again, to commit before going through the process, this shows you how powerful Clemson's recruiting machine can be, and even more powerful than I'd originally thought as well. Sticking with the offensive line again, and a kid that I've seen several times, Chancellor Barkley out of First Academy in Orlando. He's as technically sound an interior offensive lineman as you're going to find in the country. 6'3", 280, 290 in that range. He doesn't lose many reps, even in one-on-one without pads, which is really hard for offensive linemen at 5-on-5 camps, etc. Chancellor Barkley has been dominant at those, as well as Under Armour Orlando. He was the best interior lineman there, and the way he was pass setting, I think he could even play right tackle. He's not the longest guy in the world in terms of the height and wingspan combined. He's about 6'3", but his arms are long enough, and he's so good at it, I bet he could play right tackle. Look for him to be an early contributor at Clemson, just like Grant Wise. Really, really good football player. Finally, when you look at this list, this shows the girth in terms of which Clemson still has a brand. Now remember, Cade Klubnik is from Westlake High School in Austin, Texas, and they always dip in to Texas once in a while. South Oak Cliff is one of the best programs in Dallas, has been for a long time, and you can never have enough corners. Marcel Gibson is now a Clemson Tiger. He's one of the fastest kids in the Dallas area, which is loaded with track athletes. He becomes a Clemson Tiger, and that happened on March 10th. So you just kind of go through the list, and you're like, man, they're just killing it here. What is the deal with it? I think more than anything else, it's just Clemson is what it is. They sell who they are. They don't fake anything. So the kids that fit with that, if they get them on campus, it's a pretty much done deal. That's why their junior days are a little bit different. That being stated, I still didn't see this many kids jumping on board. Like, that's a really, really good program, and that's great. But to get them all just boom, boom, boom like that, great job by Dabo Swinney and his staff. On that point, though, I do want to bring up something here in just a moment, because I don't think all these recruitments are over. We're going to talk about the repercussions of what happened, because, again, Clemson got some really good players. But that doesn't mean the Notre Dames and Ohio States, North Carolinas, South Carolina, all these different programs are going to just quit. They're still going to come after a lot of these guys. That is next here on The Port. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada clear-cut team of the week would be the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC going 19-1. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in ACC games, the largest differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953 to 1954. That's incredible. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done this season. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Does anybody really think Bill Belichick is going to give up on a recruit because he committed somewhere else? What about Marcus Freeman? Do you think that Billy Napier will? And I'm just kind of going through this in general. This is where it gets really fun for me. Once we hit March, and this is going to be every day on this show, by the way, like and subscribe. I'm telling you right now, every day moving forward, we're going to have something about this with recruiting news, rankings, predictions, because we're to the point with all these junior days, kids line up OBs, and in this case, Clemson just flat out got a bunch of commitments. You still have schools that are going to come after these guys. We're going to talk about the pluses and minuses. I don't want to do that right now with a couple of schools. Florida, North Carolina, Notre Dame, or just some of them. Ohio State involved. I'm curious what's going to happen with Naeem Burroughs the most. Florida really has done a tremendous job of recruiting the wide receiver position over the last couple of years. Not shocking, because DJ Lagway helps. But Florida has still, their head coach is on the hot seat, but it's an in-state kid. Napier is very, very popular. It's an SEC program. It's the state university. I'll be curious if they can get Burroughs back on campus. As many are probably saying right now, Brian, Clemson's policy, you can't take it. I get that. Does Burroughs back off of it or anything like that? I doubt it. But again, it's not like Florida isn't going to stop trying. It's not like other schools won't either. His brother went to Wisconsin, Notre Dame offering, Florida State. He's any school he wants to go to. Naeem can change his list too. Any school that he wants to go to, I guarantee you they're going to take his phone call. Great kid, track star, proven against elite competition. There's really nothing not to like about him. Oh, by the way, again, the program he goes to, the Bowl School, is one of the best academic and athletic programs in the state of Florida. So that's a nice added bonus. Moving on, Grant Wise. I'm going to use him as an example. He doesn't get the love from recruiting services quite the way he should, but it's not really anybody's fault. He lives in the Pensacola area, and it's just an outpost of the state of Florida. It's 15 minutes from the Alabama border. There's not an Under Armour camp right down the street. There's not anything else right there. It is what it is. He hasn't been to some of these events. Not everybody's seen him. High school tape's really good, though. And he's a kid that is a mauler. He's got bloodlines to a big-time program in Miami. And I don't think there's any doubt that just looking at his frame, just the way he moves laterally, that he can be an elite player at the college level. Well, do we really think that anybody's going to stop? Like Miami doesn't stop recruiting anybody. Florida State's right down the road. Georgia, programs like that. You never know who would come after him if he has a good spring and or a good season. These are just some of the examples that makes recruiting so fascinating for me. And I'm guessing if you're listening and or watching this podcast, you look at it the same. Which kids out of this group stick with Clemson all the way through, or will it be all of them? Comment down below if you're on YouTube, at the Portal Podcast altogether, if you're looking for it on YouTube. And if it's something that you're really curious about, does this set a trend that Clemson's the one program that is quote unquote different than anybody else, with the new House settlement coming? April 7th is that day that it's supposed to pass. Again, I trust nothing with politics in our country, and I doubt many of you do either. But the House settlement means whatever the number ends up being, and just put it at X, it's guessed to be around $22 million per year. It would not go into effect until July 1. However, here's the caveat for this 1 year. This is the only year that this will be the case, 2025. Because it hasn't went into effect yet, people that had their coffers ready to go for just traditional NIL this year, whether portal or high school or junior college, a lot of them they're kind of gambling that it's going to go through as it's projected, and they're going to get this settlement for $20-some million, most of which will probably go to football and basketball, obviously. And they're going to have a second pot of gold, if you will, to dump into it. What does that mean? Well, you could see some people really throw money at some of these kids at Clemson. has gotten to commit. And I have no idea if Clemson, before anybody asked, has upped their NIL game. I have no idea. I would guess in some cases, yes. Maybe they're talking to them about it. We'll see what the House settlement is, and we'll go into it more later. I don't know. But I guarantee you that programs like, again, Florida State for Grant Wise or Miami or whoever it is, there's going to be other schools come into the fray that aren't even involved now. That's how recruiting works. They're all going to at least make a run at them because they have more money this year than they will ever have per capita for a given year. They're going to get a second allotment, if you will, in July. So that makes recruiting really, really interesting. I have no idea if the Clemson kids will take a look or not. Maybe Clemson wants to get into it a little bit more with the high school kids with recruiting. These are all guesses, and I'm a very opinionated person, and I honestly have no idea how it's going to go. So this might be the most fascinating year for recruiting. Grant Wise, Naeem, Burroughs, Chancellor Barkley, anybody could get something that they're like, man, I have to at least go see that school because they're offering, 40% more NIL, 50% more, 100% more, whatever. That's possible. This will be the wildest spring and summer for recruiting of all time. Making that prediction right now. This will be the wildest spring and summer for recruiting. Again, I'm just going to put it in perspective because of the House settlement. July 1st is the projected date, barring something unforeseen. It's like a second allotment. Kids that are committed to school X, Clemson or anywhere else, they may get a call about an opportunity to go somewhere, and it's so much they can't pass up that chance to at least take the visit. That's my guess, but I don't know. How much is the House settlement? We don't know the exact dollar amount, and we can't say for sure that it will go into effect on the 1st of July. That's just all projected until it's done in early April when the House settlement is supposed to get voted on. We'll see. But again, this will be the wildest spring and summer for recruiting ever. When we come back, I want to talk about a couple commitments. Ohio State got one, and IMG, a kid that I know very well, he's headed to the Washington Huskies. That's next here on the Portal. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players you love. Now, with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing whatever school that you love, and that's why this is a great opportunity. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much, and you get an exclusive content straight from the athletes you back. The best part, if your player does transfer, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of whatever school you want to root for with Roy. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing whatever school that you want to support with the athletes and everything that they deserve. Transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Ohio State, they lost Guthrie. That's a good offensive tackle. We'll see if they can get back in on him. But Ohio State, it's not like they're going to struggle in recruiting all that much either. They got a different offensive tackle to commit, and it's from a program that's always had good players. Maxwell Riley out of Avon Lake, Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. It's a pretty good sized school, and it's a program that's used to competition and having players. Congrats to the Buckeyes. That's been a spot that, quite honestly, for a long time, Ohio State, based on what the fans' expectations are, at least, Ohio State fans tend to go overboard on what their expectations are, but they needed better offensive line recruiting. That's something I've talked about on Locked On Buckeyes before. That's something I've talked about here on this show. And it's surprising that they've had to do that occasionally. It's been random, but sometimes Ohio State misses on O-line, and it's kind of a fascinating deal. Keeping more kids home for Ohio State could be a priority moving forward. Maybe not. They have been a national program, but anytime you have a chance to keep big guys home, you got to do it. Linemen win championships. That is not a newsflash. Linemen win championships. Here's the other part to it. If you look at college football, if you look at it from a perspective of, let's say, 40 years, you go through it and you would think it's diminished. I thought this too, how much linemen were important. 1988 to 1998 to 2005 to what, like little segments, you can look at different teams that won the title. But it's really not changed. Look at the Final Four teams from the first year of the expanded college football playoff: Penn State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. All of them did a really good job with their top-end recruits that they signed out of high school on the offensive line. Now, they had a couple of 3-stars make it too, but the elite kids that they signed, not only did they get them on campus, they kept them on campus, they developed them, their training programs, all of that. All of them could play power football on 3rd and short. All of them recruited. Almost every single player in those starting lineups were recruited out of the high school ranks. Ohio State didn't quite have the depth they normally do, and they still won the title. It's a great story from last year. They had a couple guys end up getting hurt that weren't in the lineup. Same with Notre Dame, ironically. So it was shocking that they were the 2 final teams. But again, continuity, training, the development, all of that at these programs was good from the high school ranks. The teams that are really hustling and bustling to find O-linemen from the portal, they don't tend to do well in terms of finishing in the top 5. Before last season or 10 years ago, whatever, you need high school linemen to be elite in your program. If you take one junior college kid or if you have one transfer, that's no big deal. But by and large, elite offensive linemen win titles. So I think it's a big deal that Maxwell Riley just picked Ohio State, and the Buckeyes probably need to make sure they continue recruiting Guthrie for one thing, but get more elite players in state. Ohio's still good for offensive linemen, and I don't think that's going to change. Finally, Kasani Giles, cornerback. He's from California originally, from the Inglewood area. He's been an IMG for multiple years. Really good kid. He's a corner. He just committed to the Washington Huskies, and I just want to give a shout out to him. He's always been very nice to me when I interview him at IMG. He's a kid that can flat out play, and I think he's a guy that will make an early impact for the Huskies. A couple other points about Giles. Getting a kid from IMG matters. It always matters. It will draw the attention for recruits around the country. Hey, what's going on at Washington? He could have went to several other programs. Ohio State offered him, Notre Dame. He could have went to one of the programs in California. Why did he pick Washington? That's really good. The other part of this is he's a very mature kid. When you get a talent like that, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to transition to the college football level. The off-the-field stuff, the training, he took that on as a kid going into a sophomore year at IMG, and I just remember seeing him, the way he moved, the way he practiced with some of the older guys, and I'm like, okay, he's a little different. He's not afraid to take on the challenge. I bet he ends up being really, really good, and he did. Good for him. Good for Kasani Giles. I'm glad to see him get a school picked. I'll see in what he can do this season. I'm sure I'll see IMG play later this fall, but really good guy, and I'm rooting for him. So congrats to Kasani. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to learn everything that's going on in the world of recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal. It's a lot of fun for me, so make sure you subscribe. If you're looking for it on YouTube, we did change the address. It's at the Portal Podcast. All together, just use the @ symbol. Everybody have a good one, and take care.